And that's what I realize is the barrier for most people. People are willing to pay for a resume. People are willing to pay for interview prep, but they're not coming to you for a resume or interview prep. They're coming to you to get a job. And there's a huge emotional component to getting that job that requires support, because anybody that wants to achieve something great, right? I mean, whether they want to get I have a number of folks that we work with that are targeting director of aviation positions in Part 91 flight departments. I have a number of folks that we're getting on at the legacy carriers, United, Delta, American, Southwest, and FedEx. Anybody that wants to do that is going to have to overcome some level of adversity to do that. And everybody needs support to do that. And that's what the foundation of this business is, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
So hopefully that wasn't too long-winded.
Not at all.
That's great. So at Raven Careers, you said it sounds like you're helping people that want to do airlines, maybe some corporate stuff. So you don't just work with a certain type of pilot then?
No. And that's actually a common misconception, because folks will come to us and say, what company do you specialize in? But the reality of the situation is most Fortune 500 flight departments have somebody in that department that we've worked with, whether it's the director or whether it's the director, a safety person or just a regular old line pilot. We had one Fortune 500 that interviewed, I think, 12 people. 5 of them were candidates of ours. The person they hired was one of our candidates.
Oh, wow.
They had no idea that 5 of those people had prepped with us because it's all one-on-one and we don't do any scripting. But nonetheless, over half of the people they interviewed were clients of ours.
I was going to say, so another segment I would think is guys coming from the military, right? That's got to be, it's a big transition for those folks. So do you guys work with them as well?
Yeah. So the second segment of folks that we work with is airline pilots, and that's corporate pilots that are transitioning to the airlines. That's military pilots that are transitioning to the airlines, and regional pilots that are transitioning to the majors. And a lot of that there's a lot more strategy that goes into that than people realize. So when I tell folks about the 2,200 hour pilot that's 3 years out of college that got hired by a legacy carrier with less than 100 hours of turbine PIC time, they go, well, how did he do that? Well, it was strategy. There's a lot of strategy that goes into taking a 22-year-old and getting them on to a legacy carrier in 3 years. And we provide that, and that strategy encompasses the resumes and the application reviews, but also letters of recommendation and the type of stuff that they get involved with outside the cockpit. The military folks are interesting because there's a lot of different subsets of military folks. So for instance, today, we have 3 military folks interviewing at Southwest Airlines, right? So that's a pretty straightforward one. You're taking a fixed wing pilot that's transitioning straight from fixed wing into a fixed wing flying job, Southwest, Delta, American, United, whoever. But there's 2 other groups that we work with in the military that require a little bit more attention in terms of their path to the airlines is not going to be a straight line. So the Osprey guys, the V-22s, they've had some particular changes in terms of how they're looked at. Up until about a year ago, they were looked at as basically helicopter pilots. But now the FAA has kind of reorged some of that stuff. So now they're looked at as fixed wing pilots.
So they can count their flight time as fixed wing now?
Yeah. So there's a lot of guys that were coming out that basically had to go through what's called the rotary transition program. And so they were coming out of these Ospreys and having to go through as if they had never flown an airplane before. And now that's basically changing. And then we have the straight rotary wing guys. A lot of them are Army folks, but we also have, Navy, Marine, Air Force, and Coast Guard folks that have all this experience. They may be coming out with 2,000 or 3,000 hours of flight time. And they know they're going to have to go to a regional airline, but they're looking to shorten their time at the regional airline as much as possible. And so what we work with them on is making sure that they're going to the right airline that's going to get them the right balance of experience that they need. Because when you have someone that's coming out as an instructor pilot or a Stan Eval or NATOPS if you're in the Navy, but if they're coming out with those positions, they don't necessarily need to repeat that experience. But there's some certain boxes that they're going to have to check in terms of flight times, but also in terms of activities outside the cockpit. And each regional is going to offer different benefits in that area. And so we help them figure that out. We just had a guy here about a month ago who went from helicopters to a regional to a low-cost Airbus operator in a year and a half. It's kind of a big deal because now you're talking about within 3 years of leaving the Army, he's going to be making about $180,000 a year. That's pretty substantial when you figure in the quality of life and other components that are going to go to that.
That's amazing.
It is. And each person's a bit different, right? I mean, so when we work with folks that are in their 50s, they're not necessarily looking at United or Delta. Some of them are, some of them aren't. We have just as many folks that are just ecstatic to be at Spirit, JetBlue, or Frontier as we do folks that are at United, Delta, and American. And what a lot of that boils down to is a couple of different key areas. The type of flying, advancement opportunities, schedule, quality of life, pay, and the ability to do things outside the cockpit. We have folks that don't just want to fly an airplane. And it turns out some of those opportunities to get involved outside the cockpit are going to come to them quicker at a non-legacy carrier. So kind of understanding what that fit is going to be for them is the fun part of what we do, if that makes sense.
If you've got a client that is thinking in the next 12, 16 months that they want to get on at their next job, like how soon in the process do they bring you in? Is this something you should be looking for career development services 6 months before you want to go, or a month, or like, how does that work?
Yeah, so it's a great question. So that also runs the gamut as well. So, I mean, probably the furthest out that we usually have someone give us a call is in the 18 to 24 month mark. And what they're coming to us for at the 18 to 24 month mark is, hey, this is the direction that I think I want to go in. What do I need to prepare myself and my family for in the next 24 months? Because there's additional experience they can take on within that 18 to 24 months that's going to smooth out that transition out. But if they don't know what that transition is going to look like, they're going to miss a boatload of opportunity over the next 24 months. The next set of folks that we get are the people that are, hey, look, I'm transitioning within the next 6 months to a year, right? And those folks are looking for direct strategy of, okay, what I need A, B, and C. What am I going to do next? And then look, I mean, I got a call from a pilot just the other day, 1,500 hours, got an interview at a major airline and did not make it through, and now has an interview at a different legacy airline. And they didn't kind of think that they needed any help until after they had kind of experienced some rejection. So it kind of runs the gamut. I will be honest, minimum of 12 months makes it easy because we have a lot more freedom in terms of helping someone tinker with their strategy and what they need to do. The closer we get to that day where they're going to make the transition, the less they've just removed options off the table of things they can do to make that transition as quick as possible, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Now I have a question. Have you ever had a guy that's a high school senior and says, hey, James, I want to be a pilot. What do I do? I want to be an airline pilot.
Yeah. In fact, I ran into one in the FBO about 3 weeks ago. I had pulled my airplane into an FBO in southern Indiana. There was an aircraft next to us that was taxiing out. The family of the person that was flying that airplane happened to be sitting in the FBO. And so I just kind of struck up a conversation with the woman that was there and asked her, kind of how everything was going and what was going on with the flight. And she had said, yeah, my husband's a pilot for Southwest. And so he's just taking one of our friends' children up to kind of expose them to flying. They're thinking about becoming a pilot. And I said, oh, what's your husband's name? And she gave it to me, and it was a client of ours. So I turned to her and said, oh, my name's James Onieal. You may have seen me on some expense reports. So I said, that's cool. What is the person doing? And they were talking about going to college. And so I kind of started talking to her about some things to consider. And she goes, do you mind holding on a second, and grabbed the person's mother and said, hey, come over here. And I ended up talking to both this gentleman's wife and the mother of the person that he was taking up flying. Unfortunately, I didn't get to meet them because by the time they landed, I had departed out. But yeah, I mean, we talk to high school students more than you would think. And so I have some different views on that.
And it's a funny thing because Max and I we're actually talking about doing a segment on that. Like, we both have sons that are growing up, and we were just having a conversation. What would we tell them to do if they came to us in high school and said, Dad, I want to be a pilot now? And how would we steer them compared to what we did in our own experiences, going to the aviation university and going that whole program. So it's really interesting to see. And who knows in 10 or 15 years what the landscape will be. I mean, there could be electric training airplanes that reduce the cost, and ab initio and all sorts of crazy stuff.
I'm a little worried that by the time they got there wouldn't be pilots anymore too.
Yeah,
so.
Right.
That's another segment, I suppose.
Yeah. So can we talk about some of the high school stuff for about 5 minutes?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, cool. So there's a couple of things that I talked to you about with high school students. So the first is, have either of you gone back to Riddle and checked out the cost?
Oh, it's insane.
It's not cheap. So it's about double what I paid I mean, I think when I went there,